You know that in Jesus' time, there was a revolutionary group known for his fanatic patriotism that was often responsible for causing a series of disorders? And did you know that many commentators consider that one of Jesus' disciples belonged to this group? If you didn't know any of this, you may not have heard you yet. The Zealots formed a nationalist Jewish faction that fought the Roman rule over the Jewish people. The problem was that, in theory, the ideals and purposes of Zealots often even seemed good, correct, and understandable. But what happened in practice was another story. Often they were violent, practiced attacks, and even at the center of a conflict that resulted in the destruction of Jerusalem. And in this video, you will understand who the Zealots were in the Bible, what they did, what mistakes they made, and what really happened to this group formed by fanatical nationalists. To understand correctly who the Zealots were, we first need to know that this term, Zealots, appears in the Bible in different contexts. Most of the time, the term seems to simply maintain the original meaning of the Greek zealotes, which means zealous. It is thus, for example, that the Apostle Paul spoke of himself as a zealous religious in Acts chapter 22, verse 3, and Galatians chapter 1, verse 14. This is also that the members of the Jerusalem church were denominated as zealots of law, as we read in Acts chapter 20, verse 20, indicating the zeal for the honor of the Lord. However, the name zealots, applied to the revolutionary group of Jesus' time, indicates a type of fanatic zeal. This same group was also known as nationalists or Canaanites. Even it is possible that Simon, one of Jesus' 12 disciples, had belonged to the group of zealots, and perhaps because of this is identified by the evangelist Lucas as Simon, the zealot. In fact, at this point, there are different interpretations. Some scholars consider that Simon may have later become known as the zealot because of his commitment to God's word. But most scholars believe that, considering what Lucas wrote after the year 50 AD, it is more likely that this designation had the meaning of fanatic patriotism. And if this is correct, then the zealot designation with reference to it does not simply indicate the religious zeal, but its connection with the Jewish radical group. This nationalist group was probably nicknamed Zealots because they perhaps mirrored the example of Phinehas when it showed great zeal for the cause of the Lord in a period of apostasy by some Israelites in the desert, as we read in Numbers chapter 25, verse 11, and Psalm 106, verse 35, or even in the conduct of Mattathias and his children, when the ancient IV Epiphanio tried to destroy the Jewish religion. But the Zealots party probably originated in the ideas Judas revolutionaries, the Galileo. Judas organized and led a revolt in the year 6 AD against the annexation of Judah as a provincial directly submissive to Rome. The Zealots, under the leadership of Judas, did not accept tax payment to a foreign nation or the mastery of a pagan emperor over them. They believed that the government of Israel was a theocracy and its land should be dedicated to the Lord. Thus, if Israel submitted to Roman rule, a betrayal of God would be characterized. Having achieved many sympathizers to his cause, the group of Zealots grew up and caused certain difficulties to the Romans. Many of the electrical use of force, including attacks and murders, because they believed that since a good result was achieved, violence was perfectly justified. The good result to which they referred obviously was the breach of foreign oppression over the Jewish people. And in the following years, Judas' family members continued to lead the Zealots. This resulted in the crucifixion of two of his children by order of the Roman prosecutor Alexander approximately 46 AD, and some commentators even believe that the criminal Barabbas, who was released in the place of Jesus, belonged to the group of Zealots. So, perhaps the crime that took him to prison would have been precisely an attack on the Roman soldiers. The Zealots had a very active participation in the Jewish revolt from the 660s to 70s, which culminated in the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Already in 73 AD, the last fortress of the Zealots, Masada, also fell against the Romans. And because of this, for many, the Zealots were marked as those who led Jerusalem to destruction. This explains why the Jewish historian and writer Flavio Josephus, in his work Jewish Wars, did not refer to the Zealots as actually zealous men in relation to God. Instead, he spoke of the Zealots as violent people who used daggers, that is, a group of killers. But what was the error of the Zealots? We can say that the Zealots completely distorted the vision of zeal for the Lord. They claimed to follow the example of great men of God who were really zealous for the honor of the Lord. But unlike them, the Zealots did not act correctly and had inadequate motivations. Moreover, they thought they could justify any barbarity in the name of God. In this sense, Christians should take lessons from this evil example of the nationalist group of the Zealots of Jesus' time. We know that being zealous properly is something that God is certainly pleased. In the Bible, Christians are warned to always be zealous in service to the Lord. Your duty is to contribute especially to the building of the church. Moreover, Christ's followers are expected to be committed and zealous in defending God's principles in this fallen world. And this can undoubtedly cause them discomfort in their daily lives, because although Christians be exhorted to the Bible to submit to the authorities, they are also instructed not to settle for injustices, perversions, and immoralities that mark this corrupt world. Yes, true Christians are under human governments, but before that they are under God's government. For they recognize that God is the source of all authority and that human powers are never able to destroy divine sovereignty. Therefore, unlike Jesus' time, whose zeal was basically boiled down to fanaticism for transient things and merely earthly patriotism, genuine Christians know they are pilgrims in this world. They know that they are patriots who militate for a heavenly homeland. They also know that their zeal has nothing to do with human ideologies and ethics, but with eternal principles and inviolable ethics. And they still know that their commitment is not for the glory of a human ruler, but for the glory of the one who rests on the throne of universe. These are the true Zealots who, like servants of God, have never been destroyed, even in the face of the greatest adversities throughout history. These true Zealots have existed since the most remote times, as with Abel, Enoch, and Noah. People who had zeal for the Lord at the beginning of humanity. Also with Melchizedek and the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who were faithful to the only God even when polytheism predominated on earth. Or with Joseph, Ezekiel, Daniel, Ananias, Mishael, Azarias, and Nehemias, people who kept their commitment to God, even living in a strange land. Or with the prophet Elijah and the 7,000 who did not double to Baal and rejected the idolatry of the time of Ahab and Jezebel. These true Zealots were not destroyed by Rome as happened with a group of patriotic fanatics of Jesus' time, but survived the most intense persecution. They had in their ranks as many martyrs the world has ever seen. However, not they abandoned their zeal for the honor of the Lord and their commitment to the cause of the gospel of Christ. And to paraphrase the Tertullian from Scene, the blood of these zealous people has been and will continue to be the sowing of the church. Now write in the comments if you already knew who the Zealots were in biblical times. And if you want to grow even more in knowledge of God's Word, you can study theology with us totally online and certified at the end. The information is in the video description and the first comment.
In a world full of cuts, short videos, and distractions, you chose to stay and listen until the end. That already says a lot about your willingness to look deeper. Drop your city in the comments, and if you'd like, subscribe and share this video with someone who's also not afraid to think. Thank you, a big hug to you, and see you in the next video.